interpretation of the different evidence. And for that reason, I think that everyone who's worked in this area, the radiocarbon scientists and all of the other experts, need to have a critical look at the evidence that they've come up with in order for us to try to work out some kind of a coherent story that fits and tells us the truth of the history of this intriguing cloth.
Whatever the validity or otherwise of the carbon dating result, the shroud, by its very nature, cannot and does not force itself upon us. Ultimately, it is for each of us, in the quiet of our own hearts and minds, to weigh up whether we are entirely comfortable dismissing it as a medieval forgery, or if not, consider the alternatives. For if it really is the true shroud of Jesus left in the tomb 2,000 years ago, its significance necessarily far transcends that of any ordinary relic. Self-evidently weak piece of fabric that it is, one of its most undeniable attributes has been its capacity to survive down the centuries, in surprising contrast to the altogether more solid buildings in which it has been housed. Even as recently as 1997, only desperate measures rescued the shroud from the flames as its chapel was gutted. The much earlier fire devastated the shroud's home of that time and created 32 holes in the cloth, but left the vital image intact. And if the shroud really was one and the same as the cloth of Edessa, not only did it survive the sack of Constantinople, during its time in Edessa, the city suffered image smashing, an earthquake, capture by Muslims, sieges from fearsome foreign armies, destructive floods, and violent religious persecutions. All of which, and more, the cloth somehow survived. But the shroud's other, even more extraordinary attribute simply has to be the imprint itself. In particular, its so undeniable properties as a photograph from an age 18 centuries before photography was invented. For what these surely suggest to us is that Jesus, even from so many centuries back in time, actually intended us to see how he looked when he walked the byways of Galilee and Jerusalem 2,000 years ago, and intended us to see the appalling sufferings that he endured on our behalf. Perhaps the shroud gives us the same opportunity afforded to doubting Thomas. And if that was truly Jesus' intention, then there is a very real sense in which this has seen its ultimate fulfillment in our own time. Copies of the shroud are regularly exhibited all over the world, and complete strangers come to meet the man on the shroud for the first time. The Shroud was filmed for the first time in high definition by the crew responsible for this film. This means that the Shroud's image is not only already infinitely reproducible, but thanks to modern technology and the internet, it will soon be infinitely accessible. Anyone, anywhere, should be able to see whatever they will of the man of the shroud by this means.
And every eye shall see him.
This brings us more and more face to face with that most difficult question of all left for us to answer. Just how did such an extraordinary imprint actually get onto the cloth? For the plain fact is that dead bodies do not normally leave imprints of themselves, far less anything as meaningful as the positive and negative photographs that are to be seen on the shroud. Nor is the imprint something to be explained by anything as simple as direct contact with a body covered in sweat blood. As science has repeatedly demonstrated, the image only makes sense as the product of something that has flashed over a distance to create the so carefully gradated contours that make up what we see as a photograph. Is the shroud quite literally a snapshot of Jesus' body coming back to life at the moment of his resurrection? Seven centuries ago, the Italian poet Dante asked in his poem The Paradiso, "Lord Jesus, was this how you looked?" During the centuries that followed, those who gathered for the rare showings had no way of seeing what we can see today. Ours is therefore an extraordinarily privileged time. Today, each of us can confront the face on the shroud far more directly and intimately than has been possible ever before. Even so, it is Dante's age-old question that continues to haunt our modern-day hearts and minds. This was the look of him? This down-to-earth man? This convinces me. None of the flimsy faces the painters put on him. This man never arrived at resurrection without a hard-won fight, nor was half air before he achieved ascension. With him he took a look of the earth he lay in, rock, a little soil, and old olive roots, a sturdy, serene man, common sense in a riddle, he looks like his talk. This man is marvelous, death instinct with life, life at peace. This man looks like all that I know of God. I can call him both me and Master.